Hi everyone. Today we're going to use Python to put some data into an Airtable table. Then, we'll use an Airtable automation to send ourselves an email containing that data. Airtable is a really useful tool. It's a bit like a spreadsheet, but can do a lot more. Even though today's example is simple, it can still be really useful. Imagine you have some process running, generating data, and putting it into a spreadsheet. Instead of manually checking on this data, you can set up an automation to send you the data via an email. Let's get started. First, we'll sign up for a free Airtable account. I've already signed up using my Google ID. When you're signed up, you should see something like this. In our workspace, let's create a table. We can pick Start with a grid. Now let's set up the columns for our data. We'll keep this simple to start with. I'll create an ID column that will just increment +1 every row. Then I'll create a timestamp column. This will record the time and date that the record was created. Lastly, I'll create a column for the data we create. In this case, it will just be a single floating point number. There. Our table is set up and ready. Let's create a Python script that will feed data into the table we just created. Okay. I'll call mine Airtable stuff. Let's write some comments to guide us. We're going to need to connect to the table somehow. There's a module for this called Airtable, which we'll get in a minute. Next, we'll just add somewhere for where our data is created. In a real use case, this will be whatever is currently generating your data. We'll expand this script in a future video to do this. And finally, something to take the data and send it to Airtable. Okay, there we go. Let's start filling this out. The first thing we need is some way of connecting to our Airtable data from our script. We will use a module called Airtable for this. The module gives us all the functionality we will need for this script. Let's install the module in the normal way. Pip install Airtable. There. I've already installed it, so there's nothing to do. Yours might take a couple of seconds to install. Right, let's use some of the code from the quick start in the docs to start us off. Let's set up the details for our specific table. We'll need a base ID, an API key, and the name of the table we want to work with. Let's head back to Airtable. I'll just rename the table so it makes a bit more sense. We can find the base ID in the URL in the browser, here. I'll copy this and paste it in my script. Next, I'll add the name of the table. Like so. And finally, I'll get the API key. You can find this in the account page within Airtable. If you're using it for the first time, there'll be a button here to generate a key. You can then copy and paste it into your script. Note, there is a better way of doing this, and you shouldn't paste things like keys into scripts. We'll do it the proper way at the end of the video. Great. Now that's done, we can create a variable which we will use to work with our table in Airtable. We can reference the starter code in the docs for this. Simple. With that line, we are now connected to the table. Next up, I'll just use a simple random number generator to give me some bit of data. In real life, this will be specific to your use case. For example, in here you could put something to link to a spreadsheet, and get data from there. We'll look into making some more realistic use cases in a future video. Okay, that line will generate a random float between 50 and 100. I'll also round it to 2 decimal places to make things a bit neater. I'll just make sure to import the random module. There. Oh, and while we're here, I'll also import the datetime module. We'll need this for the timestamp. Right. The last thing we need to do before we send the data to Airtable is create a timestamp. I'll just grab the current UTC time and then put it into the common ISO format. Great. Now, it's the final part of our script. We need to tell Airtable to create a new record in our table and add the data to it. For this, the Airtable module provides us with the appropriately named create function. All we need to do is call this function and pass the data we want to add to the table as an argument. The create function requires the data in the form of a dictionary. I'll create that first. All we need is two keys, one for the timestamp and another for the data point that we called output value. Great. The final line to this script will be calling the create function. This line will tell Airtable to add a new record containing the data. Right, we're ready to give it a go. I'll just delete these rows, we don't need them. Here we go. If this works, we should see a new row appear in the Airtable table. Yes, success. Cool. We have a script that will connect to our Airtable table and then add whatever data we want. Every time we run this script now, it will add a new record. Let's just run it a few more times. And there's the data. Right, we've got our script that populates our table, now what? Well, with Airtable we can create automations that perform actions for us. We're going to create a simple automation that fires off an email every time a rower is added. First, let's open up the Automations view. Automations need a trigger. There are a few options, but, for this example, I'll set this automation to trigger every time a new record is created. Now, we need to connect a table to this trigger. We only have one table, so I'll set that here. OK. Trigger done. Let's tell Airtable what it should do when this automation is triggered. Again, there are a few options. For this example, let's use the send email action. There. Let's set the details for the email. An email address. And a subject. And then the email body. We can actually put the data values in here so the data is there in the email. Great. Let's just test this automation. Everything looks good. Now we can activate the automation. They are not turned on by default. OK. We're ready to give this a go, end to end. I'll just delete these rows. Now, let's run the script. That will create the record and add it to our Airtable table. There it is. Now, when we go to our email client, we should see. Yes. Success. We are alerted every time a new data point is added. Right, let's go back and fix that exposed API key. We should never put sensitive information like that in a script. One way to protect the key is to hold it in an environment variable. On Windows we can do this by searching for environment variables in the Windows search. We can create a new variable. Let's create one here for our current user account only. I'll call it Airtable API key. And I'll paste the key. Great. Next we'll modify our script so that it gets the API key from this environment variable, rather than having to hard code it. The starter code in the Airtable documentation is useful for this. And that's it. Let's test the script. A problem. We've set the environment variable, but for the changes to be noticed, we need to restart our editor. And there we have it. Done. The example is simple, but the skeleton is there to build something really useful for a day-to-day task. What kinds of thing could you automate using this approach? Maybe you need to keep an eye on data coming into a database or spreadsheet. Or maybe you have some sensors that you want to keep tabs on. There are so many paths you can take from here. I am planning to build on what we've done here in future videos. Let me know in the comments what kinds of thing you'd like to see in those. I hope you found this useful. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.